The Eighth Amendment, passed in 1791. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments afflicted. So, little open, little squishy. What is a cruel and unusual punishment? What is an excessive fine or bail? Hard to say, but I think we all know it when we see it. What's interesting is that here we see that especially we're up to the congressional level where Representative Andy Biggs is saying that Democrats have politicized and weaponized America's justice system to unjustly place January 6 defendants in the D.C. prison system, and D.C. is refusing to address the abuse. Solitary confinement. A lot of these people were placed in solitary confinement. Many of them were placed in there with either excessive or no bail conditions whatsoever. They could not get out. And dare I point out that many of these people stayed within the velvet ropes. There are the protesters. There's 2 velvet ropes down there. They're carrying flags. They're walking between the velvet ropes. I would submit to you that putting somebody in solitary confinement for that activity is obviously cruel and unusual and excessive. Pretty obviously. Clearly. So, carrying on then, let's see. So, the U.S. Constitution, voting really matters in the Constitution. It's mentioned 40 separate times. You can find that word, vote, is in there. And so it's a lot about how representatives get voted and how electors will vote and how the United States Senate will vote and how the people vote. And of course, a conjoined activity there, which I don't think they really understood back at the Framer Day, because it was, what happened? People would vote on paper and then you would count it. And then there was a system for making sure that those got counted. So it didn't occur to them that the tabulating of these votes, that there would be a way to really ruin the system. But obviously, voting mentioned 40 times is a central concept. So it's not just the casting the vote, it's the counting the vote. Central to this whole idea of voting within the U.S. Constitution is the idea that the will of the people is enshrined within the sacred activity of voting. A vote is taken and counted, and then the results are easily verifiable by all parties because a lot is on the line. Here's the thing about humans. If they can lie, cheat, or steal, they will. Even if there's a chance of getting caught, they will lie, cheat, or steal. But what happens when you give people the opportunity to lie, cheat, or steal, and they have no chance of getting caught? It is now axiomatic, meaning it's a truism. It's axiomatically true that people, humans, on average, when given a chance to lie, cheat, or steal with no prospect of getting caught, they are going to do those things in spades. So that brings me to the next part of this conversation, which is to talk about this idea that the right to vote is so critically important that we have this other amendment passed out after the Civil War, which is really just putting a really fine point on this, saying that the right of citizens in the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So this is to say, hey, we don't care. We don't care if you're a slave. We don't care what color you are. You can vote. Of course, it took another, 66 years to include women on that whole thing, but got there eventually. But this idea that voting is really important. It's mentioned all over the place in the Constitution and its various amendments. It's vitally important, okay? Which makes this really remarkable. There was a court document that was filed now in Georgia court. It's a federal court document. You can see the document down there. I'm only discussing certified court documents, so this is no speculation on my part. This is now filed. There's a link to this I can provide to you down in the comments below. So look at this court document. This is really troubling. So this concerns, well, I'll let you figure it out from what I tell you here. So to quote, to assist the court in understanding the risks that the system creates, the plaintiffs asked me to conduct a security analysis of the ImageCast X machines and associated equipment used in Georgia elections. So those are used by Dominion. Those are made by, Dominion Voting Company. So using an ICX machine provided by Fulton County, I played the role of an attacker attempted to discover ways to compromise the system and change votes. I, along with my assistant, two people, spent a total of approximately 12 person weeks studying the machines, testing for vulnerabilities, developing proof of concept attacks. So, hey, guess what? Many of the attacks I successfully implemented could be effectuated by malicious actors with very limited time and access to the machines, as little as mere minutes. This report documents findings and conclusions. Very long report. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Just two parts I want to bring your attention to. First, principal findings. Section 1.1, quote, I show that the ICX suffers from critical vulnerabilities that can be exploited to subvert all of its security mechanisms, including use authentication, data integrity protection, access control, privilege separation, audit logs, protective counters, hash validation, and external firmware validation. I demonstrate that these vulnerabilities provide multiple routes by which attackers can install malicious software on Georgia's BMDs, either with temporary physical access or remotely from election management systems, EMSs. I explain how such malware can alter votes while subverting all of the procedural protections practiced by the state, including acceptance testing, hash validation, logic and accuracy testing, external firmware. Oh my God, people, this is a complete vulnerability nightmare. This is not even close to something that is secure. And of course, we've known about this for many years, but now it's part of a federal court filing. So I think I can talk about this more openly now because here's a federal court document. This is not my opinion. I'm reading a document filed in a federal court, part of the public record, and open now, presumably in a free, fair First Amendment kind of a country, to a rigorous and open challenge and debate. Here are some of the hypercritical flaws, vulnerabilities that were found. First, number one, attackers can alter the QR codes on printed ballots to modify voter selections. So it's not just casting the vote, it's making sure that the vote that you cast actually gets assigned to the person you cast the vote for, not to some other candidate. That seems just pretty basic, right? How about a hard no on that one? Two, the software update that Georgia installed in October 2020 left Georgia's BMDs in a state where anyone can install malware with only brief physical access to the machines. I show that this problem can potentially be exploited in the vote polling place, even by non-technical voters. I believe it's as simple as finding that open USB port, plug it in a USB, and off you go. But as well, these things are hooked up to the internet, so maybe you don't even have to do that. Three, attackers can forge or manipulate the smart cards that the ICX uses to authenticate technicians, poll workers, and voters. So, okay, so it's like you need a very special lanyard key card with an RFID chip to get into the building, but anybody can make those very easily forged. Four, this person demonstrates that attackers can execute arbitrary code with root, that is supervisory privileges. I'm going to tell you what root privileges are. Well, I won't. A subscriber at Peak Prosperity who's very skilled in these things will tell you in just a second. By altering the election definition file that county workers copied every BMD before election. Oh my God. This is crazy town. Number five, the ICX contains numerous unnecessary Android applications, including a terminal emulator that provides a root shell. Ooh, tell you what that means in a second. In a given election, all BMD scanners in a county share the same set of cryptographic keys. The same set? Oh no, same set of cryptographic keys. What does that mean? That's like, hey, good news. Every house in our town has a front door with a lock on it. Bad news, they all use the same key. Literally, that's what it's just terrible. Okay, let's see. I have to go back up a tiny bit. Okay, here's what this means. So user PB is a subscriber at Peak Prosperity, wrote about this because we were just talking about this yesterday. Said here, brief explanation of root access. Root is the top privileged super user. As root, there are literally no limits. You can edit any databases, replace any software, and enable, disable any hardware. And you can wipe all traces of your escapades off the machine. No trace, no fingerprints, nothing to suggest anything ever happened. As root, it would be trivial to enable Wi-Fi access and then go home and edit all the election results from the comfort of your home. E.g., you could change the database entries so that they're all Brandon. So all the votes are there, not tampered with, seemingly pointing to different candidates. But these candidates are all Brandon. Or you could just change the tally mechanism to arbitrarily flip votes when the desired victory margin is not met. This is not just incompetent, PB says. What this says is that the security in these systems is beyond the naive. Anyone with more than 2 years out of college, absolutely anyone, will know that these are terrifying failures. There is no way that this is an innocent mistake. Brief physical contact means 3 seconds to plug in a USB memory stick. These things should have all ports glued shut or no ports at all. The risk associated with external electronic communication ports is off the chart. Allowing technicians root access is bizarre. That there is a text file on there that determines who gets root is mind-blowing, but So there's just no way this is, if you think this is an accident, right? If you think this is just, hey, we just made a few goofs here. This is off the charts. Of course, we've known about this for a very long time. And the key part there is that with root access, you can completely remove any chance of getting caught or even detected. Why is root access being left in there? And of course, once this data is brought out here into the court system, right? So this is June 14th here, right? That's when it actually got publicly filed and released. But of course, it's been in the court system for quite a bit longer than that. So Georgia's been has had this information at its fingertips for quite a long while. And so, yeah, let's just see where this goes. Yeah, June 15th, of course. Next day, Georgia election official, told a federal court that officials would forego installing Dominion security patches until after the 2024 presidential election. All right. This is when you know you actually don't live in a democracy, you live in clown world. Faced with obvious, extensive vulnerabilities that seem to be inexplicable from an accidental standpoint. Very hard to resolve those through just mere incompetence or naivete. You find that this is the official response. Of course, this is demoralizing. Of course, this is also the parlous state of things today. Of course, this is why we do what we do at Peak Prosperity, because this is unacceptable. Full stop. I do not consent to this. This is unacceptable. And you shouldn't consent to it either. But these people are coming out and publicly telling you, this is the karmic retribution idea. Hey, our decision is that your elections are going to be completely insecure. And we also reserve for ourselves the right to call you a conspiracy theorist for daring to question or challenge those particular results. In fact, if you dare to show up in any sort of forceful way to petition for redress of your grievances, solitary confinement, you pick. We will come up with an arbitrary, capricious, cruel, and unusual punishment that's clearly excessive. That's the whole story. That's how it looks. So, of course, the State of the Union is not very good at present. All right, to round out this story, 1913, step one. Give away all monetary power to a private banking cartel. That's Woodrow Wilson there in that old newspaper article signing. They called it enacts a currency law. That's not what they did. They gave away, abdicated the right and the power of the federal government to be in charge of its own monetary system to a private banking cartel, because that's what the Federal Reserve is, right? You know that now because we just had the whole chapter in the crash course on the Federal Reserve, right? It is enshrined into law by the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. It is a government-sponsored entity. Its capital share stock is now held by private banks, right? The New York Federal Reserve, the most powerful bank out there, has close to 3/4 of its capital stock. It's the voting stock that allows, personnel changes to be affected within and the decisions of the Federal Reserve of New York Federal Reserve Bank. 3/4 of that's held by just two companies, Citibank and JP Morgan. Those are the actual owners of the Federal Reserve. Not you, not me, none of that. So when they say the president enacts a currency law, that was a little wordsmithing right there. He did not. He enacted a private banking cartel that would now assume monetary control authority and take that power away from the people who do get to vote into positions, rightly or wrongly, various congressmen, senators, and things like that. Nobody that you know of has ever voted for anything that happens inside the Federal Reserve. Just not a thing. We don't have any power over that. Okay, so that was step one. What's step two? Well, step two is, how are we going to pay for all that? It's expensive, giving your monetary system away. So you got to start taxing income. So that's Amendment 16, 1913, says the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without any regard to any census or enumeration. So in 1913, due to generous exemptions and deductions, of course, less than 1% of the population paid any income tax at all at the rate of only 1% of net income. It's one of those temporary government programs that has now crept to the point where you could easily be in an income bracket in certain states where you are paying close to 60% of your of your gross income to your various governments, state, municipal, and federal. So that's actually that's where things went off the rails. But it was a 1-2 step, right? Step one, hey, let's give all our monetary power away to a private banking cartel. What's the worst that could happen? Oops, looks like we're going to have to start taxing income. But don't worry, it's just a 1% tax on the 1%. And of course, now it affects everybody, particularly when you start fees, permits, taxes, levies, surcharges. When you add it all up, it's actually quite a big nut right now. So this is how it always starts. It starts small, tiny baby step, and then off to the races, right? So that's why what just happened with CISA and stepping on our rights and committing censorship. Oh, it's just a little censorship for the greater good. We just didn't want anybody getting hurt by misinformation, malinformation, disinformation. We were just trying to be good people. That's all we were trying to do. And next thing you know, you have a social credit score and it's getting dinged and your central bank digital currency money no longer works more than a mile from your house because you were a bad boy or girl and you said something about somebody that you shouldn't have said. Like maybe I say something a little bit disparaging about Justin Trudeau. And next thing you know, as an American, I find my money doesn't work too far from my home because I've been a bad boy. Or worse, my money will only work to buy Bud Light. Could happen. And this brings us to the final amendment. I want to talk about the 25th Amendment, which is the amendment by which a president would be removed from power and or upon the death of the president would install the vice president as the president. So it's quite obvious today that we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden is mentally competent at this point in time, obviously mangling words, unable to complete thoughts and sentences, reads through to the teleprompter at the end sentences with end of quote. It clearly is not up to the task, is clearly not mentally competent. Obviously, if the president was your surgeon and you were still conscious pre-surgery and you saw that guy walk in, I hope you would terminate the surgery on the spot. If that was your pilot, obviously you would not let them fly the plane. So why are we pretending as if this man is capable of being the leader of the United States and ostensibly de facto the leader of the free world? It's clearly obviously demoralizing to have to pretend that this is not a mentally compromised individual. Of course it is. But that's the whole point. It is demoralizing in the extreme to have to believe that we just can't install security patches and obviously defective voting machines by 2024. It's still 2023. We got time. Not that hard. You can test it, validate it, all that. Or better yet, don't use the insecure machines. Say we'd rather not have any security patches whatsoever. Go back to paper. Count it up. This is what we would do if we were a non-defective state or country. This is what we would do. We would use evidence-based medicine. We would use the best evidence-based everything we could. We would have actual diplomacy. We would go forward and we would be the standard bearers for a world that is desperately in need of high quality, high integrity leadership, but that's not where we're at. So that is my State of the Union here for 2023. I wish it was a better message to be conveying at this point in time, but the extent to which we willingly, openly, and most importantly, without protest, allow our Constitution to be completely shredded, ignored, invalidated, overwritten, but mostly ignored, is the degree to which we are playing with the very firmament of the one thing that most can be blamed for, the vast prosperity and the expansion of the middle class that the United States has seen. So if you care about your future, if you care about prosperity, if you care about leaving behind a better world for your children, your grandchildren, or whoever's coming after you, if you care at all about any of these things, these matters matter, and we should all be doing everything we can to uphold the sacrifices that were already made on our behalf in order to create the abundant, amazing, wonderful world in which we find ourselves, which is slowly falling apart. And either we sit back and watch that, grab some popcorn, hope for the best, or maybe we get involved and try and do something about that. And you know how it begins? It begins with you and I talking about this, about having the open conversation. It's about pointing out the obvious failures like we're just seeing with the Georgia state election officials. Totally unacceptable. If it's unacceptable, it's unacceptable. No bueno. Stop it, right? So that's what we should be doing, is just speaking up, speaking out. And with that, thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time. For anybody watching this on the 4th of July, have a happy 4th. Or if you're watching it after the fact, I hope you had a happy 4th. Now it's time to get busy. Thanks for listening. Come by peakprosperity.com if you're watching this out there in the wild, and join the conversation, because we have incredible, wonderful people talking about all these things all the time. Bye-bye.